What's up? It's your boy Omar. I'm back. I'm back. Aku nak buat reaction video baru. Bagi korang yang minat tengok UFC or mana-mana fighting, korang mesti kenal Khabib Nurmagomedov. Dia actually, Khabib ni lah UFC fighter. Dia punya rekod 29-0 sekarang. Tapi dia dah pun bersara daripada UFC selepas ayah dia meninggal disebabkan COVID-19. Sekarang ni orang just boleh appreciate dia lah bila dia dah tak ada kan. So saya nak tengok cerita pasal Khabib Nurmagomedov, macam mana dia membesar, macam mana dia boleh jadi antara seorang fighter yang terhebat dekat dalam, boleh kata dalam dunia sekarang, pound for pound fighter, lebih daripada John Jones. Bagi siapa yang kenal UFC, orang tahulah. Bagi siapa yang tak kenal siapa tu Khabib, jom kita tengok siapa tu Khabib dan macam mana boleh dia membesar jadi seorang yang sangat kuat, pegangan agama dia sangat baik orangnya, sangat merendah diri, dan juga seorang yang fighter yang sangat ganas. Dalam English orang panggil savage. So kita tengok video ni, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Rise of a Savage. Let's go. Penyik baik muka.
Year-olds had their lazy asses plunked in front of a TV set playing World of Witchcraft or whatever. Somewhere in the impoverished hills of Dagestan, a 10-year-old Khabib was out entertaining his comrades by rolling around in the dirt, grappling with a fucking bear. This video is just the type of meanwhile in Russia shit that can begin to explain why Russian fighters are typically tough as fuck and can at times have an almost haunting indifference.
1997. So masa dia kecil lagi, orang train fighting dengan orang lain ataupun dengan budak-budak lain kan. Dia masa budak kecil dia train dengan seekor beruang kecil. Aku tak kisahlah beruang tu besar ke kecil, aku takkan fight dengan beruang. Tengok, kecil-kecil dah berani bos.
As fuck, and can at times have an almost haunting indifference to the prospect of gratuitous violence and just general savagery.
Kalau siapa yang tak kenal ni, dia ni adalah Fedor Emelianenko. Dia pun salah seorang Russian fighter. Pembawakan diri dia ni, dia sama macam Fedor, seorang yang sangat pendiam. Diorang tak banyak cakap-cakap, tak ada langsing-langsing dengan orang. Diorang buat kerja kat dalam ring je. Masuk ring, siap. Dia tak bercakap pun, dia guna penombok je.
At the highest levels. But wrestling a bear sounds more brutal than it actually was. The reality is,
it is brutal, bro. Kau lawan dengan binatang, you never know what's gonna happen.
The bear looks all cute and cuddly, and Khabib is just playing around. To get to the root of what really makes Khabib hard as nails, there are political, economic, cultural, and geographic considerations. A good starting point, though, is the Spartan training camp in which Khabib was basically raised. While developing his skills in the disciplines of wrestling, judo, and combat sambo, Khabib lived with 15 other boys, training twice a day in an unforgiving military-style training regimen overseen by his father, Abdulmanap.
Ada pistol baik, dia membesar pun dengan dalam military training regimen. Basically kau dari kecil kau dibesarkan macam askar. Sedangkan budak-budak lain pergi keluar, pergi sisi, main game. Kau dengan, dia cakap lagi, beberapa budak-budak lelaki yang duduk satu rumah, membesar macam askar daripada kecil.
Now, whenever we hear of a fighter getting trained by his father, it immediately begs the questions, who is this guy and what are his credentials? Abdulmanap began training wrestling at the age of 8 as a powerful tool for self-defense and to instill discipline. At the age of 19, he joined the army. In 1981, I joined the Russian army and participated in all sorts of sports competitions during my time there. It was a school of
So daripada sini pun korang tahu bapak dia sendiri bukan kaleng-kaleng. So bapak dia ni memang orang yang sangat berdisiplin. So bagi korang yang ada bapak seorang askar, korang tahu apa maksud aku, sebab bapak aku pun askar. Kau tahu lah macam mana dia rule, dia disiplin orang. Rambut panjang ni, kalau aku bela ni masa aku kecil, masa ayah aku still duduk dekat rumah dengan ayah aku, mampus. Ni mampus. Ayah aku gemuk pun tak boleh. Aku gemuk pun dia marah. Aku rambut panjang pun dia marah. Dia memang dia ada lah certain standard tu bila dengan seorang askar.
Discipline. He then went on to study judo in one of Ukraine's top universities and fought his way onto the Ukrainian judo team. Over the next couple of years, he began collecting trophies, winning national championships in 3 separate disciplines: judo, sambo, and freestyle wrestling. So obviously in his own right,
judo, sambo dengan freestyle wrestling. Bagi korang tak tahu apa tu combat sambo ni adalah martial art daripada Rusia yang dia boleh katakan paling terdekat dengan MMA because dia ada grappling dan juga ada fight berdiri. And most of the Rusia punya askar tu diorang train dalam combat sambo.
Abdulmanap was not a man to be fucked with. And by combining his vast experience of
Gila
high-level
kau.
combat
Berani dengan kacau apa dia?
sports with the rigid structure of military life, he was the perfect man to mold young minds into a bunch of murderous fucking war machines. At the heart of Abdulmanap's training philosophy is the harsh principle of discipline or punishment. In a Russian documentary, Khabib stated, "There were a lot of punishments. I said to the father that I didn't want to study, he punished." When he explained...
Jadi aku cakap, itulah style hidup. Segala style hidup dengan askar. Tapi aku rasa most of the Asian parents, sebab kita ni Asian, kita tak membesar macam Mak Saleh, kita tak membesar macam the Westerners. Diorang membesar mak bapak cakap lembut-lembut ni. Kita jenis membesar, aku tak tahu lah sebab mungkin sebab bapak aku askar ataupun memang as Asian, kita memang mak bapak kita memang mesti semua garam. Semua kalau kau buat salah,
to me with words I didn't understand. With the fists, I understood immediately. So my punishment about taking away Khabib's Game Boy, it was more of a step out of line and get the fuck smacked out of you by a grown-ass man style discipline. This type of corporal punishment and military lifestyle may seem extreme or even barbaric in the West. But in Dagestan at the time, most young men were facing 2 options: a career in sports or militant Islam. So if you go to career guidance in Dagestan, you might be getting a fucking death sentence. In the Western world, we have the privilege of peaceful parenting. But there's no doubt in my mind that Abdulmanap was coming from a good place. He was doing everything in his power to equip his sons and students with everything they needed to deal with the harsh realities of the Caucasus. Having said that, even though that type...
So bagi kita yang duduk kat Malaysia ni, kita tak faham apa maksud hidup dalam peperangan. Kita mungkin generasi kita yang generasi dulu mungkin ada zaman-zaman perang masa kita ada komunis dalam negara apa semua kan. Zaman-zaman perang mungkin generasi sebelum kita, mak ayah kita diorang rasa, tapi kita nak kata yang umur-umur aku ataupun yang atas sikit daripada aku tak rasa diorang rasa hidup dalam keadaan perang. Tapi Khabib dibesarkan dekat negara yang masih berperang sampai sekarang.
Parenting is totally unnecessary in the West. When you look at some of the pathetic bullshit on college campuses these days, you almost wish you could stick some of these assholes in a container and ship them off to Dagestan to spend a semester with Abdulmanap. If they started yapping about campus safe spaces, then doctors would have to surgically remove Abdulmanap's boot from their ass like they're delivering a fucking baby. And the proof is in the pudding. Abdulmanap is regarded as the father of MMA in Dagestan. He's produced 20 Combat World Sambo champions, and at least 4 of his students have made it to the UFC. There are certain athletes whose story it's impossible to untangle from their mentor. Mike Tyson and Cus D'Amato, for example. A big part of Tyson's success came from his reverence for the wisdom of his teacher and the humble acceptance that even in the face of enormous success, he was still the student. Well, Khabib very much has this reverence for Abdulmanap. It's shameful to offend a father or an elder. If you're punished, it means you deserved it.
Ada betul juga dia cakap, kalau mak ayah kau takkan pukul kau tanpa sebab. Mostly mak ayah kau akan pukul, akan marah kau because dia sayang kau. Sebab benda-benda ni. But some people kata budak-budak sekarang kecil-kecil dah pandai, pandai dah merompak, pandai nak mencuri and all things. Tapi kalau kau ada mak ayah yang macam ni, aku tak rasa kau akan berani pun nak mencuri. Kau takkan berani pun nak buat apa-apa. Because kalau betul, tengok macam dia cakap, if you're punished means you deserve it. So kalau kau tak buat salah, tapi kalau kau buat salah, then kau kena tadah lah.
And it must be incredibly powerful when the man guiding your career and teaching you everything you know is also your primary motivation. After an emotional win over Abel Trujillo, Khabib stated, "My main motivation is my father. He invested a lot of time into me. He brought me up and made a man out of me. And his happy face after the fight is the best reward for me. I cannot let him down." Khabib has stated that his father always created the toughest conditions with the stated goal of either mentally breaking Khabib or driving him to reach that next level, constantly striving to improve. Now, say what you want about the methods, but that type of relentless striving is how you create one tough motherfucker with an unbreakable spirit and a work ethic that shits all over your regular, average, world-class fighter.
True.
To summarize that whole point, Khabib was simply bred to be a savage. It's not what he does, it's who he is. When Khabib was discussing the time he spent injured, he said the following: "It was like someone takes you and puts you in jail, like you were isolated." In other words, martial arts and violence is how Khabib relates to the world. Without it, he feels completely cut off from humanity. Every nation is a fighting nation, if you go back far enough. But in Dagestan, there's still blood on the soil. There's a brilliant article in Bloody Elbow describing the history of the region. Dagestan and the Caucasus were conquered by the Soviet Union in the 1800s in a brutal takeover that lasted almost 50 years. Since then, the region has played host to a series of attempts to establish an independent Islamic state, often centered in Dagestan. The most recent of these was in 1999, when there was a brief conflict between warring Islamic factions vying for control of the region. The whole affair lasted only 6 weeks before Russian airstrikes bombed the fuck out of their asses and brought an emphatic end to the conflict.
Damn.
Abdelmanaf believes the conflict had an impact on his children. The simmering tensions and constant threat of danger in the region placed training in a very different context, namely as preparation for the potential onset of war. I believe every man must be ready for war, even in peaceful times. It is always a topic of discussion in the Caucasus.
Macam mana korang macam kalau kita membesar dekat negara yang berperang, yang sentiasa bergolak dengan benda-benda perang pasal politik, berperang pasal agama, kehidupan bukan normal bro. Lagi-lagi kalau kau budak kecil, kau membesar dalam keadaan macam tu, kau takkan dapat keamanan macam ni kita hidup kat Malaysia ni. Hidup kau beza, cara kau train beza, kau punya mindset pun berbeza. Kau bukannya training untuk jadi fighter ke apa kan, kau training untuk survive, kau training untuk maybe bunuh orang, bukan untuk bunuh orang sahaja, bunuh orang untuk survive, untuk selamatkan diri kau sendiri. It's either kau bunuh orang atau kau dibunuh.
I'll fight anywhere, I'll fight in the street. But when Khabib says it in that calm, ice-cold, matter-of-fact monotone, you believe him. I'm sure for most fighters, the UFC is about the highest stakes they can imagine. But from the time Khabib was a child, grappling with a bear, his subconscious has likely been grappling with the prospect of a fight with far greater consequences, where it's not a matter of win bonuses and title shots, it's a matter of life and fucking death. The usual pressure and nerves associated with a fist fight must have muted significance for someone whose whole psychology has adapted to living in an area of boiling hostility between radical Islamic fundamentalists. Good luck getting in Khabib's head. The guy is ice cold. He states his intentions without any theatrics or emotion, like he's simply stating a fact. Water is wet, the sky is blue, I'm gonna fucking smash you. Can you imagine the build-up for McGregor versus Khabib? A lot was made of the confrontation heading into 205, but for me, a better summary of the two personalities were their post-fight interviews. Both were fucking glorious. Conor was his usual brash, charismatic self. Where the fuck is my other belt? $4 billion? Cheap motherfucker.
Conor McGregor.
Khabib, on the other hand, was cool, concise, and supremely confident in the face of a hostile crowd. Beginning of year, he tapped like chicken. End of year, he fight for title. There's only 6 million Irish, there's 150 million Russians. On the MMA Hour, John Kavanagh later replied, it may be 150 million versus 6 million, But when that cage door closes, it's one-on-one.
Okay.
Perfect. No
Perfect.
disrespect to Ferguson, but when you consider everything, the styles, a surgical striker versus a relentless grappler, the psychological warfare, a mouth that can decimate opponents versus an
McGregor.
unbreakable will.
Ya
The
tu.
personalities.
McGregor mulut dia memang kau tak boleh lawan lah. Aku katakan kalau kau tak cek pasangan dia pun, dia boleh buat kau trigger. Tapi Khabib je yang boleh tahan dia punya emosi. Aku cakap aku pun tak tahan emosi lah. Aku pun boleh kalau panas. Tapi itulah, kalau kau berdepan dengan orang macam McGregor ni, dia pandai main mental kau. Dia psycho kau sampai kau dah marah sangat. Bila kau masuk dalam ring, kau dah tak ingat apa-apa lah. Kau fikir kau nak pantai dia.
Confident and overstated versus equally confident but understated. Khabib versus McGregor is my most anticipated fight for 2017. It is a glorious clash of two polar opposite
Kita dah tahu
titans
Khabib
of the
menang
sport,
lawan McGregor.
right in their fucking prime. Does not get
Terus
any
video ni pun 4 tahun lepas.
If you developed a photo negative of McGregor, you'd have a picture of Nurmagomedov, probably holding a fucking
Who
knife.
wants to play? Who would like to play? Who wants to play? Who wants adult game? Lepas tu dia pegang pisau. Nice. Who wants adult game? Pisau. Terima kasih.
The last thing I
Apa
want to
kot?
briefly touch on is the geography, religion, and culture of the region. In the documentary, Khabib stated, "We have grown up in such severe conditions, in mountains. Therefore, it is evident in our spirit. Compare 15 minutes in the cage to life in the mountains. It is incomparable." Abdulmanap has stated, "In my opinion, training deep in the mountains is an irreplaceable part of training. You simply cannot go 3 or 5 full rounds without elevation training." With regards to religion, Khabib is a devout Muslim, which, as we know, does not tolerate vices like drink or drugs. If you went out of your way to orchestrate the perfect circumstances to produce a physical and mental monster, you'd have a hard time doing better than the cold, cruel mountains of Dagestan.
Damn.
And that is the monster who arrived on American shores. By the time Khabib made it to the UFC, he had spent almost his entire life training at altitude, under Spartan conditions, in a remote mountain town, with no serious distractions outside the terrifying prospect of civil war, while practicing a religion that simply does not permit vices. Khabib's not your average fighter. He is a fucking savage.
Yeah! Damn! Man, dia hero bro, dia hero. Dia orang yang, kalau korang kenal siapa Khabib, dia sangat humble dengan semua kejayaan yang dia ada. Dia boleh dapat berjuta-juta dolar, tapi dia tolak just, dia tak fight untuk duit, dia fight untuk dia punya legacy. Okay guys, and again thank you for watching. And aku akan jumpa korang on the next video, on the next reaction or the next game video. We don't know. So, bye-bye. Omar Shakur.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face. Tell me that you love me, even if it's fake.